Hi, my name is Rachel Jones. I will be providing a video tutorial on how to use Passport.js, a middleware framework that helps users easily authenticate users in their projects. I'm going to quickly go ahead and share an overview of what this product is. So Passport.js, authentication made easy. And I do want to note that all of the information I have found on Passport.js is coming directly from their documentation, which can be found at that link. And so none of this information is anything I have created. I am simply reading and relaying documentation to you from their website. So the overview is that Passport.js is a simple framework for Node.js middleware, and it helps users easily implement user authentication into their projects. And one of the strongest features of Passport.js is that they provide extensive online walkthroughs and tutorials and strategies, which we'll get into right now. What is a passport strategy? They have 539 different strategies, and each one is a unique way that they're going to explain how you can use their middleware to have a user log in and authenticated. Each one, developers can search through them and find one that has a keyword that is best suited for their project, whatever their needs are, and they can search through and find any of them. And each strategy is very useful because it contains instructions on how to use that strategy, and it keeps the code very minimal, very easy to understand, includes code snippets and links to GitHub repos, and it's very concise. So why would anyone want to use Passport.js? It's a very easy way to implement a basic login functionality. They have extensive documentation, which I'm using today, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. We can use these existing frameworks and middlewares to make code more efficient, more effective, and make our lives easier. One of the main important reasons I think it's important to use Passport.js is their implementation with using logins from other sites like Facebook and Twitter. They've got strategies and tutorials that will help you implement Facebook logins for Facebook users and vice versa with Twitter. And that's a really important and powerful aspect of it that you can take in these outside platforms and teach you how to use it with the Passport.js. So for this tutorial, I'm going to be doing a live demo of a Passport tutorial they include in their documentation, going over a simple login feature. And so this tutorial is all written out step by step. However, I wanted to do a live coding tutorial. I'm going to code along with it, show you where all the files are, write the code in live speed, and explain the lines of code, which is something that the tutorial lacks. They don't explain the code snippets. So with a combination of live coding and a couple instances where I will be taking the code snippets from their tutorial, I will be showing the entire username and password tutorial with the exception of the logout and sign up. We're going to go all through authentication and session checking. And again, all credit for this documentation goes to the crew makers of Passport.js. They provide extensive and very helpful documentation that helps users like me and now you use their product. And so just to get started, I'm going to go through what I've already done off screen. Choose your favorite text editor for coding. I am doing VS Code. They provide a link to clone their repo. I do want to let you know their link no longer works for cloning that repo, but they do have a link above it that's to the finished product. And the only thing we needed to get there is the username of the Passport.js GitHub account. Navigate to their account, go to their repos. They should have around 70. And search for the word starter, and there will be one repo that will pop up, and that is the one that you need. Get the link from there, and in your text editor of choice, clone the repository onto your local computer. From there, we're just going to do some very simple things to get this all set up. You need to run npm install, and that will take all of the dependencies that are listed in your JSON package file, and it will install node modules. And from there, you also need to run npm start, and that will bring up your development server and on localhost 3000. And from there, we can get into the next section. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get into the next section of how we're going to set up this initial login page. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to jump right into the code this time. The first thing we want to do is set up a route for authentication. So the first thing I have done off camera is just create a new file under routes called auth.js, and that is where our function that will be rendering our web page will live. So the first thing we're going to do, make that file, and then we need to put in some information in here that will help us render that. So first of all, the framework we're using for this program is Express, so we have to include that. So we're going to do var express equals require, and then we're just going to tell it that we're requiring Express. And that line. And now we need to tell it that we're doing a router. So var router equals, and we're getting that router from Express. So Express dot router, and we're not putting anything in that. We're leaving that empty. So now we have both of our variables defined. And we are going to do router dot get. This is where we're going to be rendering our page. So we're going to tell it that we're going to be doing our login. And now we need to set up a function within the function. So we're going to do function. We're going to be passing in the request, the response, and next. And we're going to go ahead over here and open up that function. And the only thing we're going to put inside this function at this time is the rendering for the login. So we're going to do res.render and just tell it we're rendering our login page. And that is all we need to do inside of that function. Let's close it up. And the last thing we need to do is export all this work we just did. So we're going to do module.exports. And we're going to export our router that we defined up there. So we just defined a router, and now we need to tell our app that we're actually going to use that router. So one of our very important files is our app.js. And here, a lot of pre-written code that comes with the framework. We are going to navigate up to where we are requiring our router. And we can see from the example, the index router was already required. So we're going to follow suit like that and require our authentication router. And we're going to link it to that file path that we have up there. So routes /auth. If I spell it correctly, there we go. And so that should work all good for connecting our auth router. And now we need to actually use it. So we can see down here, again, we're going to follow suit with what was already done for the index router. So we're going to do app.use. And we don't need to put anything in there. And we're just going to link it to that router we just defined up top. And that should be good. We're going to save that file. And we're going to go ahead and save this file. And we're going to open up our live server that I told you about. And it's right over here. And we can see if we refresh the page, nothing's here. We click sign in. We haven't written the HTML for this yet. So that's our next step. I'm going to go and grab the code and we will come back. All right, so as we can see here, if I go ahead and share my screen to show you what I was looking at, here we have our login page. This is the code from the tutorial. So I'm going to use this code snippet. And like I said before, this is our login page currently. And go ahead and copy that code from that code snippet. And you place it in your login.ejs file right under sign in. I'm going to go ahead and take out the autocomplete because I personally don't like that feature, but that's completely optional. And we're going to save that. And so now we go back to our live server and refresh it. And if we click sign in, that HTML page now has our form shows up right here. And so now the next step of our process is to verify our credentials, and we're going to get into that soon. All right, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to move on to the next part. So from here, we have our login page showing, and now we need to actually implement our passport. So I'm going to do Control-C in our terminal, and that's going to stop our live server. And we're going to use our npm to install Passport. So we're going to run that. And these little dots mean that it's installing. And that means that it installed correctly. And we also need to install Passport local. And that is the strategy that we are going to be using. As I mentioned, there are 539 different strategies. And Passport local is one of the very basic ones for user authentication. So again, npm install passport/local. And again, that is installing down there. And now we are good to go. And we have now installed two new things, so we need to tell our files that we are going to be using them. So we're all going to navigate back to our auth.js. And up here, when we included and required express, we're going to go ahead and require some other things. So we just got in passport. So let's include passport, same way we did express passport. And we have to include a local strategy, which is as I was saying, with the strategy we're using, passport local, we're going to do var local strategy. And we're going to require that from the passport local that we just installed. And there's something built into Express we're going to use for our password hashing. So we're going to do variable crypto, and that's going to help us with our secure passwords. And we have to create a database for this. So we are going to do variable db equals require. And this is already included in the starter code. So we are just referencing our separate file. We can see it down here, our db.js. So we just put /db, and that will include our database. And so now we have all of our required things in here, and we have to put in some code to define our strategy. And so there is a sample code snippet that can be found on the documentation. And because it is quite long, I'm going to copy and paste it, but I do want to explain what's happening in each step. So we are going to be using this from Passport, and this is our local strategy that we defined up here. And we're going to do making a function called verify. We're going to taking our username, our password, and our callback. So this is the hard coding for the SQLite databases for defining tables and rows and doing queries. They were nice enough as developers to do this for us. It's kind of a painful process, but basically they are selecting from the database where the usernames match, and we're sending in an error message and then the row. So if there's an error, we're going to send the callback with an error. And then if we can't find the user, we're going to send the callback with nothing, false, and send a message saying we can't find the user, incorrect username or password. Down here is a line that's using our crypto, and it is using all of this, which is the built-in stuff for crypto, the syntax for that. And then we're taking in an error in our hashed password. And again, if there's an error, we're sending our callback saying there's an error. And if it can't be found in the database, then again, we're sending our callback saying incorrect user name or password. And then down here is our one line of syntax. We're going to return our callback with the row, which will be our user. So we're then going to add a route that will send the user in when they click sign in. So under this route, we're going to do that code. We're going to do router.post, sending a post request. We're going to do our route, so login/password. We are now going to get to use the passport thing that we just did. So we're going to do passport.authenticate. And we're going to say local. And then inside here, we're going to do success redirect. So what happens if it works? We're going to send them to this file path. And if it doesn't work, so failure redirect, we are going to be sending them back to the login so they can try again. And down here, we're going to close up that function and save it. And basically, we're going to be trying to log in with the credentials that are defined in our db.js. This is a file that was generated from the GitHub when we cloned it. And these are all of the things making our database. And down here, we can see it's our sample user. So for this example, the creators of Passport have named our username as Alice and our password as let me in. So ideally, we'd run npm start. And there it goes. We are back up here with this. We're going to, for the sake of it, we'll go back to the home page, press sign in, and we'll do Alice, and we'll do let me in. And we're going to have an issue because we haven't set up sessions yet. So let's go ahead and set up sessions. So like I said, we have to install sessions before we can do the authentication. So let's go ahead and head back. And I'm going to do Control C again to stop our live server, and we need to install a couple of things. So the documentation says that we should install express/session. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're waiting for it. There it goes. And the other thing we need to do is install Connect SQLite 3, and that is going to be so we can actually store our session data. And we're going to run that. Those are both in our project now. And again, we need to go tell our app.js that we did that. So we're going to head back here and we're going to require two more things right under we require the Morgan. We're going to require passport. And we're going to require our session that we just installed. All right, and that looks all good. So now we just need to work with that SQLite thing we just installed. So we're going to do var SQLite store for us to store that. And we're going to require what we just installed. So require connect SQLite 3. And we're also going to tell it to use our session outside of the parentheses. All right, so now we are ready to go and use our session, start our session. So I'm going to go get the code snippet because again, it is quite long. So let's go ahead up here into our established session. And you can see this is what I just demonstrated us doing. And now we are going to use our session. So we grab that and head back. So we just grabbed the code snippet from the documentation, and we are now going to place it in our function. So we're going to tell it that we're going to be using our express session, and here we define our session. So you have to have a secret, a resave. This is going to save uninitialized data. And what we just did up there was start up our SQLite storing for our session data. And right here, this is exactly what's doing that. We're storing our session data. And this is using our session data with Passport right here. And so we want the session to store our data. So we need to reopen our routes.authentication. And I'm going to go ahead and grab another code snippet from online. And this is going to be either creating or destroying our session. So we're going to come into here, and right after this function, we are going to place that. And so the serialized user is what is creating our data. So you can see the callback is our user and their ID and their username. And then the deserialized user is destroying that session. So you can see it's returning not the user ID and the username. And so we can save that. We'll go ahead and save our app.js. And now run npm start again. And we're going to head back to our local host. And I'm going to go back to the base one. Make sure I'm sharing that screen. Here we are back in our local host. We're going to press sign in, and we are going to try again with Alice. And let me in, sign in. And here we are. The sign in worked. So to do the sign in, we needed to have our authentication working, and we needed to do session checking, which is what we just implemented. So let me go back to our code, and we can do a quick recap of what just happened. So we created a route for authentication, and this is what housed all of our rendering and strategies for our passport. So you can see here, this is our strategy that's verifying our username, sending back errors and messages if it's incorrect. Again, for the passport, same thing, and sending back our success if it works. Here, we're storing our user data and destroying our user data because we are using sessions, and that is a pivotal part of making this work. And here is our render to go to the login. And then here is the login for the password. If you're correct, you get to go to that file path, and it redirects you there. And if your password is incorrect, if we're using our authentication up here, you get sent back to login because it's incorrect. And with all that work we did, we can go back to our app.js and remember all of these things that we required, that we downloaded. Our SQLite store is storing our session data. This is our router that we defined. And over here, this is us using our session. So that's important for the session tracking. We are using our router. And that is all we do in app.js. The only more important thing that we did is add in that HTML right here in a very basic form for HTML. And that is what lets us actually have the clickable objects to log in and enter the data. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off our live server. And again, all this documentation was sourced from the Passport.js makers. I simply provided a live demo explaining each line of code and live coding it with you to show you how it works. Thank you for watching.